Hello, hello, hello. I hope you can all hear me today. It's going to be a great day, day 3 of the NEDAS Virtual Symposium. So today I am super excited because we have just about 400 of you fantastic people registered for our event. So excited that you're here and you're with us. And if you joined us today or yesterday and you fear you may have missed day 1 or day 2 of the sessions, not to worry, right? So if you're registered for the event, all you have to do is go into the app and you can re-listen to any of these sessions that you may have missed over the course of the past couple of days directly right through the app, which is great. But if you also want to listen to those sessions, we have full day recordings on our YouTube channel. And all you have to do is find the NEDAS channel. It's NEDAS, and you can view everything there. After today's event, we will have that live on our YouTube channel and through the app. So not to fear, we're going to be here for you. All right, so we've had such great speakers over the past couple of days, and I want to give a great big shout out to all of them. Michael Morey, CEO of Bluebird, Keith Panaccio of Squan, Walter Cannon of Zenfi Networks, Alex Gamata of Big Belly, Noel Garcia of Advantage Engineers, Carrie Getz of Strategicom, Leticia Latino of Neptuno USA, Julie Bushell of Page Wireless, Katie Copsey of Leonard McDowell, Carrie Charles of Broadstaff, Nicole Thomas of Dish, Richard Hayton of Trustonic, John Contestable of Skyline Technology Solutions, Fred Gordy of Intelligent Buildings, Joel Rackow of Fordium Partners, Ray Hild of Triangle Advisory Group, and Rich Lukaj of Bank Street. You guys are all great. And listen, you're not going to be outshined. You're just going to be among some other superior peers who are now going to be featured in today's program. And the final day of programming for the NEDAS Virtual Spring Symposium kicks off in just a couple of minutes. Today, we begin with an interview with Bernard Bourget, co-founder of Vertical Bridge. He is going to be speaking with Don Bishop, the executive editor of AGL Media Group. I see them in our queue room. They're getting ready to join our program. Super excited. And then following that discussion, we have a panel titled The Shifting Role of Data Centers at the Network Edge. And that's going to feature Bruce Garrison of Bluebird Network, Jeff Wabick of DC Blocks, Hugh Karspekin of Dart Points, and that will be moderated by Tom Brown of DataGrid and a co-founder of the Independent Data Center Alliance. And then last but certainly not least, our session today completes with a discussion about the evolving shared digital infrastructure, opportunities and economies of scale. Now that's going to feature Victoria Lamberth, who's the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Zenfi Networks. And she is going to be discussing all of that and more with Colby Cenacio, the managing partner of Cohen. But that's not all, folks, right? What's so fun about a NEDAS event? We're going to spin the wheel. We've got raffle spin-off, right? So that's going to follow the session with Victoria and Colby. So certainly want to stay tuned to see who wins our raffle extravaganza today. And then, of course, our virtual showcase of exhibits will be open. I do want to thank everyone who's been going in there. I do see engagement. I see people viewing and clicking through and putting their names in for deals, offers, and raffles there are raffles available in that showcase. So you've got to hunt around a little bit, click through a little bit to find who they are, get your names in there, and get a chance to win. I saw a couple of $100 Amazon gift cards. So that's certainly worth a few clicks of your wrist and your fingers on that mouse. So have a peek around. And then we're going to wrap today at 5 p.m. Eastern with a virtual networking event. And if you haven't been to our new virtual networking event platform, I definitely urge you to check it out. We're all missing that, in-face, person-to-person networking experience that we've grown so accustomed to at traditional events. And this is the first platform of its kind that I've found that actually simulates that in a virtual environment. You get your little head, in a little circle, right? And you get to move yourself around. You get to go to different rooms. The closer you get to people, you can speak to them. The further away, you can't hear them or they can't hear you. You can have private conversations. You can go to different rooms. The only downside, guys, is while the bar is open, we're not serving. You will have to bring your own drinks and snacks and all of that stuff. And I promise when we could get together again, I have no doubt that there will be plenty of people eager to buy, share, and make those in-person experiences unlike any other. So before I get on with today's program, I am going to thank our sponsors. We have Advantage Engineers, Philips Lytle, Corning, Wireless Supply, Zenfi Networks, SBA Edge, and Squan. It is our sponsor support that enables us to bring these programs to you and to open our sessions up and our platform up for free to all of the 400 attendees at our event. So I thank our sponsors for supporting the event and for bringing the community together to enable such great content with all these great speakers that we've had. And of course, our media partners are great. And we couldn't do this without your help, amplifying, supporting, and of course, being part of our program. And so thank you to AGL Media Group and Cloud Post and Data Center Post, Inside Towers, Safer Buildings Coalition, Telecom Newsroom, and of course, Miller Public Relations. So, we've got so many great things in store for you today, and I want to give as much time as we possibly can to our first panel. And let's see if we strike gold on day 3. If you've been paying attention to our programming over the past couple of days, since we're live, that does not come without its technology challenges sometimes. And I am hoping today is our winning session without any technology issues, as we bring up to our stage here Don Bishop, who is with AGL Media Group. Welcome, Don.
Hello.
Welcome
Good to see you, Alyssa.
So far, so good. All right. And let's see if we can bring up our esteemed interviewee, Bernard. Yes. How are you doing, Bernard?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Good to be with you all.
Oh, my goodness. This is it, right? This is the pinnacle of it, because both of you sound great. You both look great. That means I am going to enter the stage here and let you guys do all the talking from here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Bernard, if we sound great and we look great, I think there's nothing else to do.
We may be in the wrong career then.
I think we ought to just stop here and go straight to the raffle. What do you say?
Where's the bar?
Bernard Bourget is the co-founder and executive vice president of operations at Vertical Bridge. And I don't know if you realize this, Bernard, but you're responsible for the daily operations, engineering services, regulatory compliance, vendor management, and human resources, including the company's health and safety program. Did you know you had 30 years of experience in wireless and telecommunications infrastructure?
I try not to think about it because it makes me feel old, but okay.
You can do all this and still have a smile. We're going to get to how convergence enables the edge, which is the topic of our discussion. But I also want to mention that you direct Vertical Bridge's ESG program, including status as a carbon neutral company, which is fantastic, your renewable energy solutions, and efforts to ensure a diverse and equitable workforce. All wonderful things to mention.
Thank you.
Speaking of convergence and enabling the edge, how do you define the edge?
So to put it simply, first of all, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while because
it's
of
been a while, yes.
quarantine and everything, and good to be on with you. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody today. To really simplify what is edge, as far as I'm concerned, for me, edge is a distributed computing model. Basically, what you're trying to do is to start having computation take place at the physical locations or close to the physical locations where the data is not only being collected, but also being analyzed. And so to me, edge, could have various different layers of definitions, being the closest point to your subscribers, to your end users, or to your device where you're collecting and analyzing the data. But it really, for me, boils down to the fact that it's a distributed computing model.
When you talk about defining the edge, and it possibly leads to matters of the physical positioning of the equipment, the electronic assets, data centers, and micro centers. How is that folded into the Vertical Bridge activity with an eye to serving your principal customers, the wireless carriers?
So, if you solely look at it from the Vertical Bridge's perspective, we have all of these sites across the country, over 370,000 locations that we either own or have management rights to. And these are telecom infrastructure ready sites, meaning that there is space available to put the radio electronics safely and securely on them. There is power available. And now with the convergence taking place, there's now fiber available. And really, when you look at what it takes to bring the convergence concept together, and edge being a portion or part of that convergence discussion and architecture, that's what you need as a tower company, infrastructure providing company, a location that can be safe and secure, has enough power to install the equipment and run it, maintain it, and grow it, scalable power, and also have connectivity fiber available for the backhaul and connection back to the core network. And so that's the role, the physical role that Vertical Bridge plays. But for us, it's beyond that, because being part of the Digital Colony portfolio of companies, we have sister companies that are data centers, Data Bank, and Vantage. We have companies that provide fiber, Zayo being the largest privately held fiber provider in the country. And then we have edge solution providers like Edge Presence, a company that I'm very excited about. I've worked with their executive teams for the past close to 2 years. And I'm proud to say I lobbied to make sure that company becomes part of our portfolio, because I really believe in their vision and their execution strength for the model that they've adopted. So when you take all of those companies and you put us in there, that's when we become meaningful to our clients. We truly become the total package of a converged architecture solution provider for any telecom infrastructure company or telecom solution or carrier company out there.
Bernard, I'm curious how that constellation of companies works together. Colony Capital is the overarching organization. There's Digital Colony within that, Vertical Bridge, Extenet Systems. Is that part of your group? Extenet Systems, Edge Presence. Some of these are public companies. Some are private companies, partially owned, wholly owned. How does that all fit together to allow you to bring together the resources to serve those customers?
So I'll take you back to 7 years ago when we had exited Global Tower Partners, and we went to our first WIA meeting after the exit had taken place. And Mark Ganzi, our chairman, was the keynote speaker. And the question to him was, what is next? And he got up and he said, convergence. And everybody looked at us and said, what does that mean?
That was 7 years ago?
That was 7 years ago. Vertical Bridge became 7 years old, January 14th of this year. So, and since then, we've been talking about convergence. And we're proud to say that our vision has continuously come to fruition, and it evolves, and it's been extremely well received by investors and our clients, across the globe. And so the way we play is that each one of those companies that you mentioned has a specific business model and has a specific role. So we do have our swim lanes. I am never going to be an edge solution provider. That's edge presence. That is their forte. That's their expertise. I'm not going to get into design of small cells and bring in fiber. That's Zayo and Extenet. I'm not going to get into data center business. Raul Martinez on the data bank side and Cyril on the Vantage side, they're the experts in that. But what Alex, Mike Belsky, myself, and our partners in Vertical Bridge do better than all of the other guys is the tower space, the real estate that requires to build these telecom sites, be it, through the acquisitions or through our development program. And so each one of us has that role. We understand that the value that we bring to our clients is always increased when we work together and we offer turnkey solutions. We are capable and we've executed well as profitable single entities on our own. Every one of those companies is hugely profitable today. But when it comes to where the convergence is taking us and what carriers like Dish are looking for, an operator without the legacy network of an LTE or UMP or 3G that's looking to launch with a standalone 5G network can really take full advantage of a converged solution offering from a portfolio of companies like us. And that's really why we can work so well together, because each one of us fits in that piece of the puzzle that's required to provide that turnkey solution as far as a converged platform is looking for.
I've certainly heard that some carriers are looking for those turnkey solutions. Maybe most of them are. I'm not sure. You might have a feel for that. And I wondered how Vertical Bridge, together with its affiliated companies, brings all that together to a turnkey solution. How does that fit into the mix? Which customers prefer that? Which are willing to go it alone? Is there a trend in one direction or another?
Well, I think sitting here today, you have all of the above. You have established operators such as AT&T and Verizon that have their own fiber network and would rather rely on their fiber backbone, but still work with us when it comes to site locations and have engagements on small cells, or macro sites. Whether it's for expansion or densification of their LTE and their 5G networks. And there are some other discussions taking place within the data center and edge aspect of their strategy, even though they have other strategic partnerships aligned with Microsoft as well. But you have to understand, we're the physical infrastructure providers. We're not the software, and we're not the sort of the electronic side of it. So even for somewhere like Verizon or AT&T, there's always a room or place for a company like us or a portfolio like Colonies to partner up with them. And then you have other companies like T-Mobile and Dish that are what I would say purely wireless companies without a landline legacy. So and their type of requirements and what they're looking for are different. Still driving towards the same goal, building and maintaining extremely competitive wireless networks based on the 5G standard. But, sort of approaching it differently, where they're more willing to work with different fiber providers because they don't have their own fiber company. It's never going to be one size fits all, and it's never going to be the same model. But I think that's where the advantage of a portfolio like ours comes in, because when you have all of the pieces of the puzzle, you can tailor it to your client's needs and requirements.
You spoke of the vertical bridge providing the physical space. What changes have there been, if any, in your strategy in acquiring space, developing space, enlarging space, providing power to the spaces that you make available? I have a tendency, because of my background, to think of telecom towers, but a lot of what you do would be access to sites that are not telecom towers. They're rooftop sites, small cells, the sides of buildings, things like that. What steps do you have to take to make enough space available to the carriers so that they can be accommodated with this convergence?
So one of the things that we've done that has really paid dividends for us in Vertical Bridge is the acquisition of all of the broadcast sites. The iHeart portfolio, the Cumulus, Alpha, Digity, all those other portfolios that we basically have bought over the past 7 years. And the reason I say this to you is because broadcast sites come with a lot of land. And when you have those radio and TV stations there's plenty of power, HVAC, and fiber available because they're already transmitting heavy signals to cover their networks. And the other aspect of it is that I think where a lot of people did not consider this is, 60 years ago when you built those FM towers, they were in rural areas. Now the cities are right around them. The cities have expanded. So we have now about 1,700 broadcast towers across the country where they each have anywhere between 2 to 8 to 10 acres of land, plenty of power, plenty of HVAC, plenty of fiber available. And yet they're now in what is considered urban, suburban areas where a lot of these densifications or, the early on 5G deployments are taking place. And so if you want to go and put down your edge computing equipment and shelters, where else would you want to be, except where there's land, there's power, there's fiber available, and you're close to where the population centers are, because that's where the carriers are really driving the initial deployment of edge for content, for data, analytics that are going on. So for us, that has been a pleasant benefit of owning the largest broadcast portfolio in the country. The rest of our sites, we've always considered multi-carriers. The LTE deployment really changed this landscape. Nobody was relying on T1s anymore. Everybody started bringing fiber. So we became very focused on making sure that it's not just so much the physical availability of the structure, but having the information, being able to quickly turn around and tell your carrier who are the 4 fiber providers at this site and who are the other 4 fiber providers at the site that's 2 miles down the road, allowing your customers to make good, intelligent, yet quick decisions. So we've put a lot of focus into not just building sites that have enough space for multiple carriers, but also making sure we have gathered all of the appropriate intelligence so they can come to us with one question, one form, get all the information that they need in order to make their decision whether that site will work for them or not.
How many people in your organization does it take to handle all this? This is a phenomenal amount of service that you're providing.
Right. So look, we're about 230 people today, but we have a nationwide network that we've built up over the last 30 years of being in this business with various partners and vendors that we've been working with. It's no secret that we have had the most active new build program in the country. For the last 4 years, we have built more new towers in the United States than any other tower company has done. And with the acquisition of EcoSite last fourth quarter of last year, there really isn't anybody who even comes close to our network of productivity when it comes to building new towers. So we have plenty of established partners that help us, accomplish this. But here's the thing I would tell you is that we entered this business with that perspective in mind, because as I mentioned earlier, 7 years ago, we talked about convergence, right? So when you start collecting and gathering that data, and when you invest time and resources into setting up your procedures and systems right from day one, and you collect that data from day one, it never becomes an insurmountable task because it becomes part of your routine process. You start collecting data on every side from the moment you get going the way we did. So we were never forced to go back and try to collect data of the past 10 years. We started Vertical Bridge knowing that we needed to make sure we have every piece of data, because 7 years ago it was towards the second part of LTE densification. So we knew exactly what the carriers were looking for. We just made sure that we set up the procedures and the systems to allow our employees to collect all the data from the start and put it in the database for us to be able to refer to.
I'll come back to your comments about the broadcast facility acquisitions. I was not in the room when you folks were discussing that, and I must admit, I was a little puzzled why a company would want to acquire such tall towers. Now, obviously, it's possible to put cellular and other antennas at lower levels on those towers, particularly FM towers. Maybe a little bit more difficult with AM, but FM certainly. And these remarks you made about acquiring the land and having the power availability, because these sites require a lot of power for their transmitters and such. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I've also been aware, because of my background, the encroachment of developed areas on antenna sites, particularly AM stations, which virtually are locked in where they are now. There's hardly any place where they can go. Right. So those sites have become very valuable for their space. Makes good sense.
Exactly.
What's the mixture of readiness? To what extent do you as an antenna provider plan ahead and install equipment in anticipation of the convergence and the computing? And to what extent do you rely on the wireless carriers to provide their own equipment? So some of them may wish to have their own micro centers. They might want you to provide them.
We don't get involved. So with the services side, when we build a site, we make sure that there is power available for the number of carriers that we've designed the site for. There are plenty of conduits available to bring the fiber in. And the rest of the maintenance of the site, the compound, the space, the availability, access road, the fencing, all that stuff is just general standard practices that I think most other companies in our space, execute every day. We don't get involved with telling our carriers what they should do as far as their electronics and architecture. At the end of the day, the Vertical Bridge model is that we are a real estate company in the technology sector. We provide the land, we provide a secure compound, we provide access to power, and we give you the fiber to bring whoever your preferred fiber provider is. And we work with you to identify the appropriate location for your need within our compound to deploy your equipment. Whether you want to go with your, Nokia and Ericsson or somebody else, that's the carrier's choice. That is not our business. We don't get involved with it. So the relationship between our clients and us is really conflict-free, because we're not pushing services on our end, and we're not pushing any specific gear. We're neutral when it comes to that.
Conflict-free.
I know it's hard to believe, but I think we've achieved it over the last 7 years. It's because you have to really understand what is your business model. I don't see an incremental value from getting engaged on services if that is going to lead to any conflict between myself and my clients. That's not our forte. I'm good at providing real estate, quality sort of location with the requirements that the carriers have. And they're very good at building their networks and maintaining and controlling the airwaves that they've been licensed for. So it's the best of both worlds.
Maybe some of the elements of convergence could be expressed as the antenna sites, the fiber, and the data center aspect of it. There's a fourth that some are talking about, which would be the shared radio equipment, Open RAN, and possibly the antenna site providers installing the radio equipment and renting the space on the radios to the carriers. Is that an element that is part of the future that could come to pass, or is
Right.
that less likely?
Well, look, first of all, in my view, Open RAN is different than shared RAN. I think Open RAN refers to a standard, to be able to bring on third-party applications and content and services.
I agree. That's better expressed as shared RAN.
Right.
Yes.
Shared RAN is something that we've seen in Europe. Some of the European governments for specific license awards of spectrum and for sort of attempting to what I would say close down the digital divide in their countries and encouraging carriers for rural network deployments have mandated certain levels of shared RAN. I think it becomes harder when you have such mature legacy networks that Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T already have. It becomes hard for them to sort of get to that point. I'm not sitting here worrying about what a shared network standard or protocol could do in the US because of the vastness of the market that these carriers have to invest and deploy in. And the fact that when you look at it, we always talk about everybody's deploying 5G and we're in an unlimited world. Therefore, how are these carriers going to differentiate their services, and their ARPUs are under pressure or they're not, all of that stuff. But the way I look at it is that when you really look at how Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, and now Dish are approaching their customer base, there are very specific distinguished features that they offer. And their network becomes the enabler of those distinguished features. And so I think a shared RAN concept is something that, unless it's regulatorily sort of mandated for the future awards of spectrum, that the carriers would probably be sort of looking at it as is more complex and complicated than continuing to densify and deploy their own networks and competing the way they've been competing.
With the constellation of companies under the Colony Capital umbrella, you have a lot of sister and related companies to draw from for services and products. Are there opportunities for vendors to do business with Vertical Bridge beyond that? Products and services that you require that you're unable to obtain through your network of related companies?
Absolutely. Look, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we don't do services. So if we're building a site, we have our design engineers and construction managers, but we're not the ones out there pouring the concrete or erecting the tower. And I can tell you that on the multiple deployments that we've done with Edge Presence, they do the design, they do the configuration of the edge shelter, because each location is different. But they have the subcontractors that come and bring the shelter and install it, pour the foundation. And the same thing on Extenet side and Zayo side. They have vast network of GCs that they use to deploy the small cells and fibers. The beauty of it is that people do hit us up on LinkedIn or email us, and they have certain services. And every time I read the description, I'm like, well, in reality, you should be talking to so-and-so, because that's what they're focused on. And we make, introductions. So yes, there's plenty of opportunities for vendors to work with us. I can't even begin to tell you the number of approved vendors that just Vertical Bridge on its own has, let alone every one of the other companies that.
Numbers in the hundreds, perhaps?
Easily. If you look at, we utilize both Aveda and Comply as part of the industry best practices to qualify vendors and to make sure that they remain qualified and certified with their trainings and NWSA certifications and all that stuff. And if you
Yes.
look at the list of approved vendors on both platforms, it is easily in the hundreds for Vertical Bridge. And I'm sure if you talk to the sister companies, it's equally the same for them as well.
Do you see differences in the operations in urban versus rural, where Vertical Bridge maybe takes care of more of the operations in one part of the country than another?
Not really. We always have our scope of work. We know what we're good at and what we're supposed to deliver, and that's what we sort of stick to. So no, I mean, look, building a site is building a site. You gotta do the entitlement. You gotta get the ground leases. You gotta go through all of the permitting, the NEPAs and the SHPOs and the zoning and all that stuff. So the scope really doesn't change. The complexity may a little bit depending on where you're building. But we're pretty disciplined to stick to what we're good at.
Is there anything that causes you some worry or concern over the next year or 2 years regarding the wireless infrastructure business?
That's a good question. Look, we've talked a lot about. I don't know if I would say concerns, but we as a country have talked now for a good while about an infrastructure bill that will allow us to close the digital divide. And I believe, and I'm not getting political, but I believe that the pandemic and the lockdown really showed that there is a digital divide in the rural parts of the country. And I think we in this sector, in the wireless communication, have been extremely fortunate. If you go back to 2008, that recession hardly had any impact on us. If you go back to last year, with everybody going home and utilizing their wireless devices even more, this sector has not really been negatively impacted as compared to the airlines or hospitality or cruise ships and stuff like that. So I think we do owe it to our fellow citizens to do what we can to really deploy these networks in the rural areas, find the appropriate way to make the business model work so we can really deploy and get the citizens on the rural side of the country access to these broadband services. And, one of the things Alex and I have said is that you look at what China did when it came to giving 5G spectrum to their carriers. The Chinese government said that in order to expedite deployment of 5G, I'm not going to charge you for the spectrum I'm giving you. Take that CapEx and put it into deploying your 5G networks. We did the exact opposite thing. We just finished our C-band license and got $94 billion from the bidders. And then we took 93 billion of that and are trying to put it in an infrastructure bill and give it back to people to say, go ahead and deploy the broadband network in rural areas. Well, maybe if you hadn't taken $94 billion from the carriers, they would have, instead you would have said, I'm not going to charge you as much for the C-band license. But the C-band license comes with these requirements. You're going to have to cover X amount of the rural parts of the U.S. within the next 5 years. Maybe that would have been a different approach to try. So I'm not going to say I have a business concern. I think we are in a very good spot as a sector, as an industry. I don't believe 5G is anywhere close to being here. We have plenty of growth room ahead of us. The content, the solutions, the applications haven't even been developed or rolled out. But I think we have duties and obligations to the country that we can do better in a private and public partnership that hopefully we'll continue to focus on and move forward toward.
I recognize what you're saying. The carriers are tugged in two ways. They have a requirement to build out, but they also have to come up with the money to pay for what they bid for. Right. How does that affect their business prospects for expanding their wireless infrastructure?
Yeah, well, so if you listen to, look at it in two ways. Traditionally or historically, every time there was a big spectrum auction, the carrier CapEx expenditure sort of on the network side, on the infrastructure side, would slow down for about 12 to 18 months, because that's also the amount of time that it would take for the radio and all the gear to be ready to accommodate the new spectrum. This time around, pleasantly surprised because even though Verizon was the biggest winner and bidder on the C-band auction, they were pretty adamant that it wasn't going to impact the capex that they had committed to spend on their network this year. And I think yesterday they also announced that they're still on track to hit all of their goals. And I think AT&T has done the same thing as well. So going through the C-band auction, we were preparing ourselves that the carriers, for the amount of money that everybody was hearing was being bet on those spectrum licenses, that we were expecting that there would be a slowdown on network investment. But coming out of it and hearing the CEOs of the, two of the four companies talking about it, that no, we're still committed to spending the capex that we set for this year. That's great news. And I can tell you that sitting here today, looking at the co-location applications that are coming in, it's true. They have not held back, and they are spending the money that they said in densifying and expanding their networks. What it means for them next year, who knows? Depends on the economy and how long more we're in this pandemic situation, where the country is. But right now, I don't have any warning signs to worry about it.
That sounds very, very positive. That sounds very positive.
Wow.
Alyssa, I see you just joined us on the screen, so I want to say thank you to Bernard Bourget, the co-founder and executive vice president of operations at Vertical Bridge. And Alyssa, is our next step perhaps some questions or to move to the next session?
Yeah, well, listen, Don, as usual, you've done such a thorough and engaging job in working with Bernard to share what's going on from their perspective, and to learn a little bit more and get give the market a view as to what's happening there. Bernard, thank you so much for being so forthcoming and welcoming to our program and to sharing insights. It's all great, and we all need each other, right, to be able to do this. You've got to.
Alyssa, I will acknowledge your comment as usual, but actually, this is my first time of participating in an event like this, and I couldn't have asked for a better person to have as a guest than Bernard. So thank you, Bernard.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Well, thank you for inviting me. Thanks, Don, for partnering up with me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody today.
You got it. All right, gentlemen, we're going to go on to our next panel and continue the conversation about the edge. I'm going to bring up Tom Brown, who's going to join us here. Hey, Tom, how are you doing? Are you good,
Alyssa,
Tom?
how are you today?
I am okay. I'm excited to have you. Yeah, we hear you okay. It would be great if it was a little bit louder, but you can project a little bit. So Tom is the CEO of DataGrid, but he is also one of the co-founders with me on the Independent Data Center Alliance. And Tom's been around in the industry well, maybe longer than me, right? I'm on 25 years or so. Super knowledgeable. Right. And Tom's got a really great panel of data center companies talking about their perspective of the edge. And Tom, I'm going to leave it with you to do the introductions and call up your panelists. You've got Bruce and Hugh and missing one person, but you'll take it from there.
Great. Jeff Wabeck of DC Bucks.
Jeff.
Well, thank you again, Alyssa, and thank you everybody for joining today. Just waiting some few folks to join the crew. But thank you again, and thank you, Don and Bernard, for leading up to our discussion today. Today with me, I have DC Block's Wabeck, I have Dartpoint's Hugh Karspekin, and Bluebird Network's Bruce Garrison. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for joining today and spending part of your day today. It's great to be back here at NEDAS. It's been real fun to join these panels. So a special thank you to Alyssa and team. Today's discussion is around the shifting role of data centers at the edge. And you guys have had a lot of things going on. And really, for our audience today, it's really focused on connectivity, because that seems to be a common thread and a common theme amongst each of your companies. I'm going to ask Jeff to go ahead.
Any of you
and
or see any of you.
Introduce himself, but if I could, for a
I'm
second.
gonna try to reload this page, I guess.
Busy year this year. Expansion in Birmingham, Alabama, 1 megawatt enhancement of power. They just did a significant financing close, and now just broke ground on a greenfield data center and the construction to commence. So, Jeff, please introduce yourself and welcome. Are we having technical difficulty?
Yeah, I think Jeff's having some sound issues. He can't hear
I
us.
see some of
but
you
we
now and
can
hear some of you
him.
now. I reloaded. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
That's a yes. Okay. Was it my turn
Great.
to talk?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Welcome.
All right. So I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I reloaded the page. Okay. I think we're having technical difficulties.
Go ahead,
I got
Jeff.
nothing. What? I'm sorry. I didn't hear the question.
Tom, maybe we should repeat the question.
Yeah, so Jeff, all Tom wanted you to do was introduce yourself. What a great way to do that, having technical difficulties. You got to love it, right? Can you hear us, Jeff? Jeff, can you hear me? He may not hear us. So why don't we move on and we'll work through that on the back end here. And you pick the next one. You got Bruce or Hugh here.
Sure. So Hugh, as I said, you've had a busy start to the year. Congratulations on the acquisition of a Medion. That really gives you 8 additional markets in the Southeast and certainly supports your interconnection strategy. So Hugh, please introduce yourself and thanks for joining.
I'm kidding. Actually, I can hear you just fine. I just thought I'd play a little joke on that one. Thank you very much. Hugh Karspecken, co-founder and chief strategy officer of DartPoints. Yes, thank you very much, Tom. Yeah, we're very excited about that acquisition and the expansion into the extra markets. And also just, heads down on our growth strategy for 2021.
Thanks again, Hugh. Bruce, good to see you again. Good to talk with you. You guys have been super busy as well. Starting off the year with the acquisition of Cola Hub in Quad Cities, Iowa, strengthening the 5G network to a fiber deployment to over 500 towers just last month announcing, and another fiber expansion in the Midwest. So you guys have been super busy. And Bruce, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tom. So Bruce Garrison, I am the Chief Revenue Officer of Bluebird Network. This topic is very relevant for Bluebird because generally speaking, the markets we operate are in the edge, both from a fiber infrastructure and a data center, or what may be considered as the regional edge today. So, but plenty of expansion going on in both densifying metro networks, added a new data center, as you said, Tom, in the Bettendorf, Iowa area, and will continue to be acquisitive and add infrastructure to our footprint.
Thank you, Bruce. So, and hopefully we can have Jeff join us and work out those technical difficulties. But, I just wanted to set the stage before we get into our topics of discussion and questions. But listen, we can all agree that we're in the midst of a digital acceleration, right? That the transformation has already taken place, but really we're actually in a digital acceleration. And there's really a fundamental in it occurring before us. And I believe that that's happening in 2 different ways. One will be a geographical expansion around major metropolitan areas, but the other, really, what we're focused on today is around highly specific locations. And both Bruce and you guys really listen to your customers, and that dictates where that next edge data center will be. Some of the driving factors at the edge is 9 billion devices are currently connected, and we believe 30 billion devices will be connected by 2030. The continued emergence of 5G and AI is certainly a significant factor. So really, every company is working through this transformation. And just tell us, what are your clients looking for, and what are some of the requirements that you're seeing that are driving where that you locate these sites? Bruce?
Sure. So our customers, when you think about what Bluebird, the markets that we operate in, it is generally the secondary and tertiary markets of the Midwest, with the mission to connect those markets and get them back to the major markets where where today more of the eyeballs are today. And what our customers are expecting at the edge, it's really just a repeat of what's already available in major markets. You just have more regional hospitals, healthcare companies, more regional banks, more education institutes wanting the same technologies and the same use of applications that the larger national enterprises are using. And so to do that in a city like Springfield, Missouri, St. Joseph, Missouri, Columbia, Rockford, Illinois, you are having to push the network and those applications and softwares closer to those customers, and therefore it is just a repeat of give me what the big enterprises use. I want it on a smaller scale and closer to me, and that is the theme we follow into these new networks that we're expanding into, or these new markets that we're expanding into. It's like a delay. It's always a delay, huh?
We need better networks.
Jeff, do we have you back?
Can you hear me now? Can you see me and hear me?
Jeff, I hear you.
Okay. I think that Tom is the one that's on high latency network or something.
Jeff, can you hear us okay?
I can. Sorry, I'm that rebel, right?
Perfect.
I got that Linux laptop and
There we go. Great, Jeff. To kind of catch up. Again, to catch up with the question I asked you and Bruce, is every company is working through the transformation. What are you specifically your clients looking for, and some of the top 3 requirements you're seeing for your customers? I know you guys look very closely at your customer requirements, and dictates where exactly you guys will build your next site and connect that with an ecosystem of network connectivity. Perhaps you can share that with our audience.
Okay, so I think I heard most of what you said. I'm not sure if other people are having a hard time hearing Tom, but he was a little late enough. But I think he asked me basically what is the DC.
Q, maybe you can give.
No, Jeff, go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay. Did he ask me to basically describe what DC Blocks does? Is that it?
Which customer sections and that the needs that you guys are.
So the mission of DC Blocks. So just I think you asked me to introduce myself a while ago. Let me just jump in and do that real quick, and then we'll spring forward. So my official title is Chief Strategy Officer for DC Blocks. I've been around since the early days. Back in like 2013, 2014, when we were doodling on cocktail napkins about how to build a modular, efficient ecosystem of data centers designed to serve locally but connect globally. And we really have realized that vision over the course of the last 6 years, and we've recently acquired some more capital to move forward to continue the expansion. But DC Block's mission is to build these modular, efficient data centers that are well connected in what we call underserved markets. The definition of underserved is kind of left as an exercise for the reader, but suffice it to say, we listen to our customers, and there are many out there who have been neglected simply because they don't live in an NFL city. So we've gone through a great exercise and a methodology to understand where is their need, what is the need, and it's sometimes where you least expect it. And there's other places, I think in Birmingham, we're the first tier 3 data center in the state of Alabama, and there's a lot of great business in Alabama. And so that was a whole state essentially in a metropolitan city that had been completely neglected to a large degree. So we're continuing that expansion as we move out into other parts of the country. And the question about what customers do we target? The answer is sort of all of them, right? So the key is, who are the customers that are neglected? They can be in all verticals. We have customers in legal, in healthcare, in government, education, small mid enterprises, like networks. We have some mom and pops as well that just need a place to keep their equipment cold and safe and dry and well connected to the world. But the key in all of these cases, no matter who the customer is, it's obvious that, I'll use the phrase again, cold and safe and dry. So everybody needs to have their equipment someplace safe. It's their key critical IT infrastructure. And once that is in one of our facilities, or presumably any facility, the next most important thing is, how does the customer and their employees and their customers have access to that equipment 24/7 by 365 with high bandwidth, low latency connectivity to anywhere in the world. So the mission of DC Blocks is not only to build these bunkers out of concrete and make sure that they're the place that you want to go when the hurricane hits, right? Because you'll be safe inside the building, but also to make sure that the connectivity never goes down, along with, of course, the power and the cooling never going down. So that's the mission. So we're as much a networking company as we are a data center company, and customers who have that connectivity component are drawn to us. We're working with a customer right now for whom we are custom building a dark fiber based 2.4 terabit network that has to carry 106 discrete services. And usually a customer would go to AT&T or to CenturyLink or something like that, Lumen, and get that done. But instead they're coming to us because we know how to do it, and we do it every day. It's not a science experiment for us. We've been running on dark fiber with carrier grade optical transport gear since day one. So it's really just a matter of course for us to our customers.
I'm going to assume the question will come my way, so I'll get right in there.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And Hugh, if you could please give us your perspective on.
Absolutely. So, like Bruce and Jeff, DartPoints is focused on the smaller tier 2s, tier 3s, and let's go even further and make up another category of tier 4s, where we are really pushing out that remote edge. Again, very similar with regards to our customers are looking for professionally managed data centers. They're looking for sites that appear to be data centers. They are not looking for the traditional central offices and things that the deeper you get out into the network are the types of facilities you end up having to deal with. And so we are trying to get, DartPoints builds, owns and operates data centers into these markets, and we look to bring back that connectivity to the more centralized, again, what we call the regional hub. We focus on the data center space. We've got cloud assets. We just deployed one of the commercially available, one of the fastest commercially available servers out in Iowa last week. Which is quite an interesting achievement, given the fact that the single server is 4.5 kilowatts. So that's a pretty hot server. But being able to do that in these remote locations and be able to provide that type of asset for our customers to use. Again, the customer sets are across the board. We focus on the ecosystem. We believe that these are locations that need to be able to service everyone's needs, not just the data center's needs. So we make sure that there's a timing and sequence of these, who comes in first, who buys from whom, upstream, downstream effects. And those customers range from the carriers to the FAMGAs to the enterprises. And the farther out you go in these markets, the more you'll see those types of players, the hospital systems, the local municipalities, the police departments that are looking for that connectivity, the compute, and the data center resources. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Hugh. So again, as much as we want to put the pandemic behind us, I think it's important to discuss how has the role of and the evolution of the edge data center shifted during this pandemic. Jeff, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that? On how this has impacted these edge data centers?
Okay, sure. So kind of hard to know in some cases, right? I think overall, as we entered the pandemic, we had, if you want to call it a pipeline of customers, we had customers that were installed, they were happy, life was good. A new sequence of customers that are always the ones that you're hoping will decide to become part of the family. And when the pandemic hit, some of those just stopped. And I think it may have been fear in the market of not sure what comes next. Is the stock market going to crash? Is this ever going to come back? What happens? Does the whole world die? Is this the pandemic that wipes out humanity? But at the same time, we saw a lot of resurgence in well, I shouldn't say resurgence. We saw a big surge from, I don't want to say unlikely places, but as many of our customers or potential customers who went dark, we had customers that suddenly came out of nowhere and said, holy cow, now that the pandemic has hit, all of my people are working at home, all my transactions are happening in a different way, my business has shifted, I need to make these changes. I can no longer have my 2 people manning my data center in my own basement of my building because they get sick, and what if they get sick and then I've got nobody to manage it? We need a protected infrastructure. So candidly, I think the whole pandemic has really accelerated the concept of what I like to call remote humanism. I think, while I'm in downtown Atlanta or midtown Atlanta here, and I can look on 85 and see that there is, again, a lot of traffic out there. I think for the most part, we've now realized a paradigm shift in how we're all going to work in the world and with each other. And it's going to be very remote. It's going to be data intensive. It's going to be connectivity intensive. And we've certainly seen that acceleration. And I don't expect it to change. I think that we're not going back to where we were 14 months ago in terms of how people view Zoom as a viable way or whatever tool as a viable way to conduct a meeting. And it tends to drive our business more. So there's some burps. I think there was some economic uncertainty, but a lot of that has settled out now. And it's sort of full speed ahead for us.
I agree with you. Bruce, want to share your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So, I think Jeff used a word that I would just use again, and that is accelerate. I'm not sure if the pandemic has shifted much of the creation of or the use of edge data centers. I think the big thing that's shifted it the most is our use of data in running a business. Whether it's all these, whatever, AI, Internet of Things, all these connected devices that you mentioned, just the more intense use of data is what is requiring more efficiency, less latency, and all that means you got to be closer to the users of that data. I do think the pandemic's accelerated it. I think there's certain industries it's made it, exposed it as if you're not going in a digital direction, you're in trouble. So I think the pandemic has accelerated, but I think the biggest driver is just our use of data and the serving video customers from Dallas and Seattle is not enough anymore. Or a software that an ERP or a CRM software and just serving it from the West Coast is not enough anymore, and these things have to get closer to the users.
That's helpful. Hugh?
So what I find interesting is all 3 of us on this panel have been looking at a different paradigm for quite some time. And so we are not surprised it's business as usual in many ways. The pandemic strengthened the argument that Dartpoints has been making, is that the resources that are being requested are essentially needing to be in different locations, not a brand new location, but need to be distributed even further. Again, the terms that have been used here are closer to the customer. Localization of not only data, but also of traffic. People able to access the content, the local content, without having to hairpin 800,000 miles away in some cases. That is not an efficient use. And when the pandemic hit, we saw a massive shift from networks that were linking commercial real estate properties to networks that were linking residential properties. And yes, they do all tie in eventually, but the issue here is when that also is applying to the schools. We had a lot last summer of dealing with, all of a sudden, you've got this act of God with the pandemic, but for example, up in Iowa, They had a second act of God with the derecho, okay, which took out eastern Iowa and other parts of Iowa, where all of a sudden the schools that they wanted to open up, I mean, resources, they needed to be reassigned. They needed to be replaced, not because they were wrong in an original location, but now you had, when the network starts going down, that performance gets even worse. And so people are recognizing very quickly now that this duplication of resources in areas that people hadn't really thought about in the past are now very real. And so we've been focusing on that since 2012, and really dropping these locations and where in places where the people that will enact those types of resources and networks can provide the same service that you would expect in a tier 1 market.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Yeah, I said it earlier, but there's a whole set of people, businesses, entities, whatever you want to call them collectively, who have been neglected. I'm sitting here again in Midtown Atlanta, but the DC Blocks facilities are kind of scattered around here, 100 to 200 miles away, in cities that people are accustomed to flying over. But guess what? People live there, they work there, they have important businesses there. Corporate headquarters are there, and when those folks in those smaller markets have to put their stuff in Atlanta because it's the only place they can find a home, then it turns into a logistical nightmare for them to get to it. Do they have somebody that, hire a new employee in Atlanta, hire a new employee in Dallas, hire a new employee in Chicago, whatever it is? Or do you, get a data center, a facility that's close to you and be able to drive there? Go hug your server if you need to. Some people like to do that, right? They don't want it to be 5 miles away. They actually want to hug it. So that's been really important, right, is the locality. While at the same time, there are other folks who specifically want to push their stuff out of their market. They've got 2 data centers in market, and they realize that they're both on the same power grid. They're both on the same seismic zone. They're both on the same storm path. And they realize the disaster recovery strategy might not actually survive a disaster. So if we can help them, and you said the same thing, right? The key is in the distributed nature. Some people want to have things local, but you've got to connect globally and regionally, certainly, to be able to offer folks an option to do what I like to call disaster prevention. If I've got a third of my gear in city A, a third of my gear in city B, a third of my gear in city C, I can connect them all with the network, make them look like they're living all in my basement, right? If a meteor falls from the sky and destroys city B, I still got 2/3 of my stuff. I'm still in business. The network's still whole. That's the key, right? And everybody's got a different mission. Every customer has a different philosophy, a different set of legal and regulatory constraints that drives them into their methods and their thinking. And sometimes laziness is how they ended up being where they are. So we like to show them a brighter future where they can actually have a preventative solution rather than a recovery solution.
And there's been, to add on that quick point, there's been a change in thinking how assets are deployed. And so we've seen that not only as of a couple of years ago, people had a handful of choices where they could place centralized infrastructure. Now they've got options of hundreds. Okay, and demand for hundreds. Software can be written for as little as 15,000 eyeballs. Okay, so there's new revenue opportunities, and now people are looking at, okay, how do I do this? And we have been focusing on operations that are meant to be dark. Nobody's out there. So how do you maintain the site? How do you provide a solution? A digital solution to more of a logistical problem? How do you assist someone who needs to deploy 2, 3, 4 servers into 50 different locations across the country effectively without having to get on an airplane and do this, especially under the guise of COVID? So those are interesting challenges that have been theoretical up to now, but now are quite real. And you've got some very intelligent folks that are trying to solve that for their companies. And now we've got 3 intelligent folks here, not throwing you out of the mix, Tom, but we're on the panel. But we've got intelligent folks here that are actually trying to kind of meet them in the middle and be able to help them do this and drive this.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One thing that I want to do is kind of shift the conversation towards security concerns, right? The shifting role of data centers at the edge. I would love to get your perspective on security. It's always been a big concern. And Bruce, perhaps you can kick off this portion of the conversation.
Yeah. So, the Bluebird standard in operating a data center. So our data center platform, is in what we would consider secondary to tertiary markets. And, they're because of the same services, the same critical infrastructure, IT infrastructure that sits at these, they expect the same security requirements they do as if they're in, downtown Dallas. So, we have it's a tier 3 certified facility in both locations, multi-step authentication, the 24/7 man security, it just the general requirements of the data center. Just the only difference is it's just at a little bit smaller of a scale, and our average customer size is, in the racks, not in the multiple megawatts. But it's no different than, us at Bluebird. If we choose to operate in a major market like Chicago, it would be a tier 3 facility, and in the same expectations, just at a bigger scale in these bigger markets. But I don't think the customer requirements are changing into the edge, at least on this, what I call the regional edge. The micro edge, where there's many, many more devices or huts at the bottom of cell towers, I do think that, the 24-hour man security, all of those different things are going to change there. But in this first phase of just densifying certain major markets and then, creating those ecosystems in the secondary and tertiary markets, these are just the same requirements on a smaller scale.
Can I get perspective on that?
Absolutely. So the customer's requirements for security, as Bruce mentioned, are not changing the farther out you get. How we handle that is where a lot of creativity comes into, where, again, it's also level setting with regards to what to expect. When you've got a small site, you have fewer number of people there, okay, which is actually in and of itself is, back in the 90s when you would put a router online, you didn't broadcast the address, and if nobody knew it was there, well, it was harder for them to go after it. Placing these sites in areas that the physical threat, that are not necessarily recognizable as a telecom hotel, if you will, from these remote sites is extremely important. You don't advertise and televise that, hey man, I'm right here, because then you can have issues that do occur. Within the site, obviously, each one of our sites is fully compliant. Our sites also provide escorts, but we don't handle escorts with regards to the mindset of a traditional data center. Our technicians travel around very similar to the telecom technicians, in packs of twos, and kind of have got a serving area, if you will, in terms of how they do this. As you get into the site itself, again, you have got, there's folks that have tried to make the racks unbreakable, but they're not unbreakable. And people can change things. So you've got to be very careful about who can touch power, how do they touch power when they're installing, can you take anybody else out? So so we have focused on compartmentalizing each one of our customers, and those assets, whether they're ours or our customers that are highly vulnerable, then we segregate them, and we make sure that they are in something that cannot be accessed beyond, again, the traditional dual authentication, updated access lists. We don't handle, we don't have punch codes. People who come in need to show that they are who they are, and that's a logistical challenge because people do get sick, and so how do you get someone else out there that is sick? And we've got ways to present that to our customer, that are kind of secret sauce stuff that we do to make sure that customers are never barred from getting into their equipment in the event of, let's say, an illness, but also that the site is fully secured and all customers there that are secured as well.
I expect that Tom, he's still having network burps, is going to ask me the question next. So I'm just going to go.
Appreciate that, Hugh.
Yeah.
Jeff, your take on that?
Yep. Okay. So I have to agree with Bruce and Hugh, right? I mean, I've said it before in one of my previous comments. When people become part of the DC Blocks family, we have to keep their stuff cold and safe and dry, right? So we have a team of, I like to call them professional paranoids. I'm one of them, and we make sure that everything we do is in tune with keeping everybody's equipment cold and safe and dry. So there's components to this, right? One is what I'll call guards, guns, and gates. I think I advocated for a facility design once that had a sniper tower. They rejected me. But guards, guns, and gates everywhere. You think about what could happen. Is a dump truck going to come down the street and smash into the building? Is the data hall behind another part of the building that can act as a crumple zone? All of those things that you fantasize about what could go horribly wrong. The homogeneous incursion where there's the guy with the black mask and he creeps in overnight and snips the wires. It's not really practical. It's not how they do it anymore, right? It's 2021. So we think about all the components of security, guards, guns, and gates, but then the information security side of it as well, making sure that all the systems, all the process, all the procedures, all the governance, even right down to hiring employees, making sure they have background checks, all of that stuff, right? That everything we do is holistically sound, and we seek independent third-party validation, right? It's not enough to say, my building is secure. You actually have to go off and get certification, be compliant, get that independent third-party validation. At the end of the day, we can talk a lot about concrete, we can talk a lot about barbed wire, we can talk a lot about ISO 27001, and we can talk a lot about those things, and they all converge into what I like to say from time to time is that we're not really selling data center services. What we're selling people is a good night's sleep, and how do you give them that? You give them that with quality, because quality of people, quality of solution, quality of infrastructure, quality in terms of reliability is what allows people to get a good night's sleep, and people really appreciate that. So that's the key.
I laugh at that good night's sleep one. That's absolutely what we need.
Thank you, Jeff. So let us shift.
And what it means is I
looking
get no
forward, right? And this is for all of you folks.
Tom, could you repeat that, please?
Guys, let's talk a little bit about. I know we only have a few minutes left here. Let's just talk a little bit about. Sure. We only have a few minutes left here, so I really want to talk densities. And as we look forward a few years down the road, do you believe that we'd be challenged with power densities at the edge and the deployment of ample power as we continue to evolve, whether it's at the towers, whether it's at these small, dense micro edge sites? I'd love to get your perspective on power density. Bruce, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Mine's kind of pretty short and sweet answer on that. We've seen no power density issues in any of the kind of secondary markets that we operate in. And generally in the Bluebird footprint, there would be many more of those if we could add a data center, and I think the theme would continue. I don't see any constraints in the current regional edge, as I've called it. Now, these micro edge, Hudson, the bottom of cell towers, I think that once there hits a certain amount of scale and volume and power requirements at these smaller sites, I think you're going to run into some density issues. But that being said, I don't know if we're there yet to really be able to say it's a problem. I don't know if there's I don't know of applications that aren't being able to be effective at the micro edge yet. But that being said, I think we're early into that stage, and that could be the area where there's more constraints than versus in this regional hub. You or Jeff, you can just jump in.
Your thoughts?
Yes.
I'll just go. So I agree with what you said, Bruce. A part of this too is there's a couple concepts I was thinking about while you were talking, right? One person's core is another person's edge, right? So what I think of as edge, you might think of as, wow, that's a big city, right? So there's a concept of sticking a little a little shack in the middle of a cornfield someplace and having a micro edge out there. Maybe there's value in that, maybe there's not. Depends, I suppose, on 5G cell tower placement, all that stuff, right? But as I think about power densities, we know as an organization what we need to deliver in terms of megawatts, kilowatts, whatever it's going to be. And there's a methodology, and you guys, you and Bruce, you know this, right? You don't just say, I'm building over there, right? You say, I need to find the 1 or 2 street addresses in this market where I know that I can get the connectivity that I need, where I know that the power companies deliver the power. And if I need a new substation, what's it going to cost me? Do I have 2 power grids? So you don't just randomly say, oh, there's cheap dirt 46 miles out of town, I'm going to go buy the dirt, because you could have a problem, right? Fiber costs $120,000 a mile to trench. I don't know how much it costs to pull in power infrastructure 46 miles to do 10 megawatts or whatever. So you make smart decisions about where to put it. The micro edge stuff, I question if that's ever really going to be a thing. If you're an organization and you're running 1,000 different micro edges, you've got 1,000 boxes deployed up in the field. How many truck rolls does it take to keep that stuff working? So I'd rather have connectivity to where I need and get us back to what I call the edge, which is, again, these underserved, often neglected markets.
Mm-hmm. And I'll finish up on that. It's going to take a while for some of the dense applications to make it out into these tertiary markets. One point I'd like to make is, Bruce, the term you use is micro edge, and there's a lot of people think that a lot of these sites are small. And what's interesting, so dark points can build a small site, but we don't plan small. And why I'm bringing up the differentiator here is that's how you address the density issues. So our sites, we can move very easily into these smaller markets. We can get facilities going, and then we allow that local market to tell us how are they using the site. Okay. And some of these we expect. So if you have a lot of telecom providers, your density is going to be maybe not so dense. Okay. But what we are doing now is we are connecting local content with local peering and local interconnection, and that will start driving some densities. We know that one of the issues of there was a very early step into placement of sites at the base of towers, but having built out a lot of that cellular backhaul back in the early 2000s and understanding what those resources look like, there's the use cases are very different based on not only the geography, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 markets, but also in the actual asset. Like if you're in a high-rise building, or are you at a base of a tower, the use cases are very different. And they're not all the same. And if you think of like a tier 1 data center and how they view data versus a tier 1 market data center versus a tier 3 data market, it's very different. We see a lot of transactions and that don't quite require a lot of density. However, with that being said, we look at this, we all take a look at the space, power, and cooling paradox, right? That we all, and dark points is no different on some of these sites that we look at. How we approach it is very different. And what's interesting, I referenced this server that we turned up last week in Iowa, North Liberty, Iowa to be exact. It's dual phase liquid immersion. Okay, so we are taking a look at how we can allow traditional mindsets and data centers to grow. How do we allow the physical building to grow? Okay, and then actually, how do we allow density to take on new footprints and new types of cooling technologies in preparation for 4 or 5 years down the road, where you are going to have someone who's going to come in here and be like, if someone were to come into a hut, we don't build huts, but into a hut at the base of a tower and says, I'm putting 25 kilowatts in there. The business model has to support that amount of equipment that goes there. But secondly, there is no chance in Hades that they're going to be able to get enough cooling in that hut to even remotely approach that 25. You just physically can't. There's laws of physics. So unless you go into a brand new type of technology. And so we are trying to be forward thinking, a lot of that, practicing it now. Not only how do you deploy that new technology, how do you manage it and operate it in the same mindset that a traditional data center might. So we're not seeing the densities yet. We are planning for those densities, though.
And I want to jump in and make a quick comment about density. You kind of talked about applications, you talked about servers, high load, kilowatts. I spent a lot of time in the 90s in London, England, and I was when I first got there, I had been there before. Asked people what happens in London because in the 70s, it was the UK was big industry, cars, planes, trains, automobiles, things like that. And I said, what happens in London anymore? And one of my colleagues says, we just push money around now, right? Don't really build anything anymore. We push money around. And I think that paradigm is actually what's happening now in this business, right? I think there certainly are a number of applications out there that do a lot of compute, that generate a lot of heat, that need to be cool, that need a cold safe space. But what we see as the real area of density is in connectivity. We're going to talk about 5G. I don't know if we're going to have time. We've got 4 minutes, but the hunger for just raw bandwidth to every device, every set of eyeballs, is really the thing that we see driving what happens next. So when I think about density, I think about communications density and connectivity density and carrier density, and being able to have carriers and even us and you guys, right, peer in these edge facilities. Sure, you can backhaul everything to Dallas. Sure, you can hairpin everything back through Atlanta, through 56 Marietta if you want to. But the densities that we see happening are more about how do I get the density of connectivity? How do I build a nexus of connectivity in these underserved markets, right? To facilitate this huge glop of traffic that we're going to generate from 5G. It's not going to be autonomous cars, right? But there's going to be killer applications that are going to generate it. So, I don't know that we're going to be, I think Google and Apple store a lot of data. A lot of folks do. But I think, much as London now just pushes money around, right? It's a financial center. I think this business is increasingly about pushing ones and zeros around, getting them from there to there. They maybe have to sit over here in my data center for a little bit, but that's the density that we see. And that's one of the areas we are primarily focused, is making sure that we can facilitate connectivity in any scale, terabits and beyond.
Bruce, any comment on that?
No, I would. Well, I guess I would agree. Given that Bluebird is in the network business as well, I would agree with Jeff in terms of these edge, regional edge, micro edge, whatever we want to call them. These data centers of all varying size, the network choices for the customers that select them is just as important as security or anything else. The carrier hotel and you're at 60 Hudson, Tom, the amount of carriers in there is, I think it's close to 100. You're not going to see that same scale, but you cannot turn up a data center without, multiple 5-6 choices of networks. And then once the networks are there, then you're going to get content pushed closer, and then that densification is just going to continue. So this is, tackling the edge is not just colo discussion. It is the network is part of it, and once you put those two together, then all those with content are going to want to follow. But obviously, like I said, the network is as instrumental as just the buildings that the applications are going to sit in.
And the design to make sure that the density of connectivity, which, as you said the right thing, Chris, it's not going to be 100 carriers, could be, probably won't be, but they're still going to push a lot of data, and they can never, ever, ever go down, which means that you can't ever have a physical design for a building and the surrounding area where one dude with a backhoe, because they're out there right now, right, where one dude with the backhoe can take down your facility, right? It's got to be a whole fleet of these backhoes, right? So that's right. So density isn't all. The model's changing, right? Density used to be how many servers, how many megawatts, and now we think, for me, it's about how many ones and zeros we push through, and how do we keep them pushing through? Because what happens when this thing goes down? My phone crashed last night, right? So I know what this is like. This thing turned into a brick. But when this thing goes down, we all get really grumpy, and we can't do anything anymore, right? And that's the thing that is really driving the business: reliability at scale.
That's right.
No, and it's all about experience, right? So, and the experience is key. It doesn't matter how it's architected. It's all about the experience. And the challenge we're having here with the technical difficulties is somewhat challenging. But I completely understand. At this point, we have just a few minutes left. I just want our panelists. Alyssa, do we want to go ahead and have a few Q&A?
Happy to do a Q&A with these folks. You know, it's doing a live event is always fun. So first off, I thank everybody, you know, for bearing with us. This one, we had a couple of issues with latency, of course, with the voice, and with Jeff. And so let's make this, you know, really about
any closing comments that you would want to provide for our audience today. Again, we have just a few more minutes. I'll start with you,
right.
Jeff.
Oh, closing comments? Is that what you want? I don't know what to say. You know, it's been an adventure. You know, I'm the longest tenured.
Sorry, Jeff. My apologies. Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. So I'm the longest tenured employee, if you will, at DC Blocks. It's been a fun ride to go all the way from Coxsville Napkin to building data centers, having made a few mistakes, you know, a few miscalculations as to where the market was going and what the customers wanted, but to adapt to that and really recognize that even in the face of a pandemic, that, you know, what we did is fundamentally sound, that the bet we made heavily on connectivity has come back to pay dividends in crazy ways, and we think that accelerates. We didn't get a chance to talk about 5G, but, you know, the edge connected data center, I think, is the future. Can't lose the hubs in the big cities, but it's been a delight to be part of this adventure, and there's a lot of great times ahead, and I'm looking forward to being in this business with all you folks. So thank you for having me and for considering DC Blocks to be part of this today.
All right, I'll take a run at the next closing comments. Yeah, I appreciate Tom, Melissa, you guys putting this all together. I think, and similar to what Jeff said, it's a very exciting time. I don't know if Tom was trying to say anything. And I really, it's the same thing I tell Bluebird employees. I mean, it is such a privilege to get to be in this industry. And I say this infrastructure industry because, you know, whether that's better education for our kids and students, better healthcare, more access to news, media, better connect with people, all of these great things, better efficiencies in retail. It just, these things won't happen. These technologies won't be able to innovate without the infrastructure at the edge, the fiber, the data center, add in the cell towers, which was a prior topic. So it is exciting to be in this, and it's even more exciting that there's a lot of things we think are going to happen, and to just be part of the ride and see what evolves over the next 5 to 10 years.
Exactly.
You.
Absolutely. Well said, both of you, Bruce and Jeff. What's very interesting is the killer app that everybody likes to talk about. It's not here yet. And what's crazy is it's not only not here yet, but the guys that can develop that killer app, okay, are waiting for exactly what we're building to get out there. They want to see that. We have a chicken and egg. COVID kind of pushed it a little bit. You know, all of us speaking and pushing out our infrastructure and showing people that it can be done has pushed it a little bit further. But for example, you know, we're trying to solve some gaming issues, some issues for the gaming industry. And what's interesting is they're like, no, there's just no infrastructure there. I'm like, well, hold on, let me go there. Okay. And all of a sudden that changes the entire dialogue. We've got essentially a hub and spoke fiber network that's out there, but our software developers have been building a logical web mesh for years. Okay. It's only now that we've actually started to actually deploy mesh networks. So the point is, when you've got, now granted, we've been doing it for the last couple of years, but everything, again, all the cell towers that I had built out fiber 4 years ago, not myself, but the industry, it was all going back to centralized locations, and people were trying to say, but I need that to go over here. And what happened was people would have to write code to be able to get that over there. And the issue here is when the software side and the telecom side do come together and they're talking about the same assets, that's where you're going to start seeing a lot of innovation, and where you can have a lot of localization and not have it, crumple the system, which it can do, and which we've actually, in our own experiences just within the last 12 months of this pandemic, have seen. It's very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. I definitely agree. On our community board, there have been some discussions there in regards to edge. And I did throw a comment in there, right? That we need more distribution. It can't be just a hub and spoke, right? We need to have more distribution, more reach. We need to stretch things out. And every single one of you are doing that, right, in your businesses in a very complementary way with the network infrastructure, coupled with the facilities, coupled with the locations, coupled with, the size of facility, and the focus of facility, from interconnection, right, to hyperscale and enterprise grade, to highly secure capabilities. It's really remarkable that we need this, right? We need it all. It's not one size fits all. It's all sorts of sizes, makes it happen. And I can't thank you guys enough for all being here and being part of this. And, I know Tom had some technical delays, and we were all so patient, right, in working through that. You guys in particular with those delays. And I know sometimes those things are out of our control. Certainly wasn't intended. And so I want to give a big shout out to Tom, really, for making the magic happen. As disjointed as it may have felt, we were still able to get quite a bit out of you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
All right. All right, folks. So coming up next, we've got Victoria Lamberth and Colby Cenacio. Colby is with Cowen, Cowen. Sometimes we have spelling errors in our announcements and other things. So I apologize if there was an errant or missed E out there in the Cowen name that wasn't meant to be on purpose. So I apologize. We'll make sure that that's right in the future. And without further ado, Colby, take it away.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. So for this panel session, it's called Evolving Shared Digital Infrastructure Opportunities and Economies of Scale. And we have 20 minutes. And basically, I'm just going to interview Victoria. So Victoria, thanks for doing this. I guess just to start, can you provide a quick overview of Zenfi and what you're predominantly doing in your role as Chief Revenue Officer? And as part of that, how the company's service offering has really evolved over the last many years. I think that's a big part of what we're trying to get at during this fireside chat.
Sure. Well, first of all, Colby, thank you so much. Great to see you, even virtually. And obviously, thank you for NEDAS. It's been a great couple days of content. Wish we were all in person, but I do have to say I enjoy being able to go back and look at the panel. So appreciate you putting this on, Alyssa, and thanks for the opportunity. My name is Victoria Lamberth, Chief Revenue Officer and one of the founders of Zenfi Networks. Zenfi is a digital infrastructure provider of fiber optic networks, wireless siting, and network edge colocation. We started the business in 2014, and at that time, our core team was made up of industry veterans who had previously built fiber optic networks, and a group who had previously built some of the first outdoor DAS and small cell networks in New York City. And so when we came to this stage about 7 years ago, we came with this unique perspective in our area, which was we saw the wireless companies coming to town. We saw they were gobbling up fiber networks. We saw that the traditional fiber providers really didn't understand how these network architectures were being created. And so when we founded the business, we founded it on a focus of enabling, at the time, 4G networks, so the densification of the network. And we ultimately saw this evolution to ultra dense networks. Excuse me. So when I think about the evolution of Zenfi and where we started, we started with this vision, and the vision was to take what we had seen in the wireless world of the vertical tower, and we thought that we could turn it on its side and create a horizontal tower in a dense urban environment like New York City. And we saw there was a necessity to do this because of the cost of deploying in an area like New York, and because of the congestion. And so we created this vision where we said, all right, instead of doing the old model where you create these high capacity networks, but for sparse networking enterprise applications, we're going to create a network of neighborhood networks. We're going to take that ground space of the tower. We're going to put it in what we now call network edge colos, but at the time it was within traditional data centers. We're going to take that, the steel that goes in the air of the tower. That's going to be our front haul fiber network, and we're going to have to find a way to make that accessible. And those rad centers in the sky, well, those are our vertical stubs. Those are our pole tops, our sides of building, our smart street furniture. And when we initially came to market, I would say that there wasn't this same level of buy-in for the benefits of convergence that we see today. And I think part of that was because there just hadn't been a need at that time. There weren't that many networks that were needing these dense applications, as we were seeing in New York, and part of it was just because we hadn't brought these multiple industries together. So beginning of the focus was on solving that front haul fiber architecture. As the years went on, we evolved from leasing our own data center space to building out our own colo facilities. The requirements from the carriers had shifted from wanting their radios within 20 optical miles of the baseband processing to 10. So we found a need to build these network edge colos out. And I would say in the past year, we've had a real focus on working with the carriers, working with municipalities on developing new wireless siting opportunities that are both multi-tenant and multi-service. And now as we look forward, now that we have our infrastructure in place, we're starting to look at ways to expand our product offering into shared spectrum and radio assets and the like, but I'm sure we'll get into all of that.
So it's really interesting. I mean, you've gone in the last 7 years from selling a product or a standalone service, which is really fiber, but meant for mobile carriers for the most part, to one now where you're selling an evolving solution set. Yes. And that includes, various components, including, I guess, the co-location space, as well as, what you could actually do on the small cell. So I guess with that said, so small cells and the use of a CRAN architecture has helped companies like Zenfi evolve from selling fiber to more of a solution to your customers. But it seems like the next step in this evolution is the use of virtualized infrastructure. And you kind of hinted at that a little bit as well. Can you talk about what's meant by virtualized infrastructure and where we're on in that process or in that journey?
Sure. And the first thing I'll say is your first comment in the beginning of that question is spot on. The reason we've seen convergence in this sector is because of the CRAN architecture. It was necessary to move that processing away from the co-location of the radio back into the network to save costs. That CRAN originally is for centralized, RAN, but eventually cloudified, right? Sharing processing dynamically across the network. And so there was a real push and need to provide for providers like us to provide these turnkey solutions to the carriers, right? So the byproduct of that is we've now built an infrastructure where we have, the heart of the network again is a colo facility. You've got your carriers all in there, high capacity, redundant power, hardened telco facility. You have your front haul network reaching out and touching sites, and you have wireless sites deployed, and you have these deployed for carriers today for them to utilize their proprietary spectrum. However, there's now an opportunity, and you're seeing this come down from the FCC, of opening up more spectrum to be made available for providers like us and others outside of the traditional carriers. And what that's going to allow for is the placement of neutral radios on these wireless stubs. And instead of selling, right now I have basically three main, customer targets that I'm trying to sell to, and we're selling that turnkey solution. But once I have a neutral radio, all of a sudden I can provide solutions to virtual network operators. I can provide solutions to the traditional carriers from an offload perspective. I can provide solutions to municipalities or large enterprises who are looking to build out their own private networking applications. So it's really an explosion of opportunity. And I would say we often hear at conferences and events the question, where are we with the 5G rollout, right? You always hear that, and we always hear the response. It's always done in a baseball analogy. Oh, we're in the first couple of innings, maybe 3, maybe 4, whatever it is. Well, when we talk about virtual infrastructure, we are just starting the game, and I think that is exciting for our industry, because this is the next frontier for all of us infrastructure providers, and it comes back to what allowed us to get here. What allowed us to get here was the CRAN architecture that created this converged architecture for many of us to play in, to build physical assets for others to share. And now that we have those physical assets in place, the natural evolution is to allow the sharing of spectrum. So when we talk about virtual infrastructure, we're talking about shared spectrum as the overlay on top of the physical network.
Okay, so a bunch of things here. So first off, CRAN is really it's an architecture, and then a vRAN or ultimately ORAN is the virtualization of that architecture to enable services. And you're talking about neutral host radios as that solution. Is that happening now? I mean, are you seeing others, perhaps competitors in other markets in the United States? Is this something that we're already seeing starting to roll out?
Yeah, we are already starting to see it roll out. We have not yet rolled out our product offering in New York City. We are still in the process of developing that product, but we are testing it. But we're seeing it roll out in other areas, and we're seeing it roll out for really interesting applications. We've got outdoor CBRS private networks that are enabling school systems in this virtual environment, connecting their teachers and students in suburban and more rural areas, working hand in hand with the municipalities and school districts to provide setting opportunities and having an underlying infrastructure provider provide that radio service. We are seeing this virtual network architecture already being deployed on traditional Wi-Fi offload. So this concept, Colby, isn't new, right? Like, we have virtual network operators today that purchase roaming agreements across existing networks. We have the mobile operators do offload across wireless Wi-Fi networks today. What's different now, and what will be different about the future, is the quality and class of service that can be provided on something like a CBRS network or a Wi-Fi 6 network is going to make these networks now at a level of sophistication that previously we couldn't deliver. And that's what's so exciting. And I think that's where, when I say we're in the beginning innings, we're going to have to see, CBRS as a test case. How does the spectrum sharing work? How much access do you have? If you're operating within the GAA in a specific area, is that good enough? It may be in some areas of the country. In other parts of the country, you may need your PAL. So I think that we see a lot of opportunity for companies to invest in this space, and we think that it's only natural that the first entrance will be the neutral host, because they already have the assets in place today. Placing an additional radio is not a major uplift if you already have your power, fiber, and wireless site available.
So for obviously perfectly then for a company like Zenfi, to in some cases be your own customer, I suppose, on some of those small cells and to use your own data center for your own physical infrastructure. And from that perspective, actually save the CapEx requirement, whether it's for the carriers or it's for others who would want to potentially use these services. Before we talk a little bit more about some of the use cases, and you mentioned in the school system, I think Crown Castle's doing that in the LA district, if I'm not mistaken. You talked about using CBRS, unlicensed spectrum. You talked about Wi-Fi 6. Is that what was the inflection point here? Was it when this unlicensed spectrum became available? And I think that FCC is expecting to auction off the 3.45, which I think is also going to have some version of that. Is that what's making now the time when we're starting to see this?
Yeah, I think we have this perfect crossroads, right? Where you have a lot of infrastructure that's been built out to support proprietary networks, mobile networks. And now you have the augmentation and the ability to access spectrum. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was the carriers who were, the major carriers who were gobbling up all this proprietary spectrum, right? And now you have an opportunity for smaller folks like us to compete. And I think that the FCC, understands that by making the spectrum available, they're creating an ecosystem that enables competition, right? And I think that they are going to continue moving in this path to try to find ways to open up spectrum, to make it available so neutral providers can provide that service. And look, the concept of sharing assets makes sense, right? Making an efficient use of capital and efficient use of our, physical resources, use of space in areas where there isn't access to a lot of space. So the same concepts still apply on, in the virtual realm. And I think that the fact of the matter, all of us would agree that there's going to be the continual explosion of data driven on the network. There's going to be continued capacity drain on the carrier networks. And there's always an opportunity for carriers to augment their own networks and for others to come in and provide a competitive service offering. Again, maybe it's not with all the bells and whistles that, your AT&T and Verizon may have, but you may not need that, right? And so that's where, this opportunity is opening up. But back to your original question, yes, the timing is now because of these auctions that are being made available and the spectrum that is being made available. We call it the democratization of spectrum, right. the ability to open up that playing field.
I think part of this too, then, and you've hit on this a little bit, is the cost benefit. I mean, there's lots of commercial buildings indoor where it's not economical to deploy a carrier-specific DAS network. Typically, I think of that as maybe less than 1 million square foot buildings, maybe less than 500,000 square foot buildings, and there's lots of them. And it seems like if you had a neutral host provider, we'll use Zenfi as the example, there's an opportunity for those mobile carriers to roam effectively onto your network, and you could negotiate some type of roaming agreement with them to do that. And it seems like that's a way to kind of start to get better quality service indoor in a lot more places where it doesn't exist today. So I get the mobile use case, and it doesn't necessarily have to be indoors. There's lots of other places where that would make sense as well. But what are some of these other use cases that you're seeing right now? You mentioned the school system as an example, and maybe we could break it into enterprises and then municipalities, but where are you seeing other opportunities? Where does this potentially make sense? What are some of the earlier cases you think we'll see beyond just the mobile carriers using it for roaming purposes, maybe to save money?
Yeah. So obviously from mobile, we have the two flavors, right? Your traditional carriers, your AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and Dish Now, providing offload opportunities off their existing spectrum across your own private network. So that's one. The virtual network operators are probably the most natural next step. That's who we're seeing the most interest from today. And again,
companies that have the MVNOs, maybe you could Google Fi, that type of thing.
a Google Fi, exactly. Even a Comcast, like the cable companies. I mean, instead of having 3 or 4 potential customers, that opens the door to tens, or potentially even 100 customers. Those will be the natural first adopters. But after that, you're going to start seeing enterprises adopting as well, and you're going to start seeing use cases for private LTE, private 5G applications, which obviously you can think through some of the use cases indoor, but we mentioned some of the outdoor ones as well. When it comes to municipalities, right now, I'm not seeing them so much as a customer as an enabler, right? So eventually, these municipalities, that they'll likely use the wireless siting for IoT applications, leverage LoRaWAN network to deploy sensors and that sort of thing. But they don't need to. You're not going to pay to bring fiber and power and pay for a brand new greenfield site for that type of application. You're going to leverage something that's already available. So what we're seeing more of today is an increase in public-private partnerships, and we're seeing it not just within our market. We're hearing it from partners, competitors of ours in the news, and we're finding that municipalities are getting a lot more savvy about both the benefits of expanding broadband infrastructure and what they can do to incent companies like ours and the major carriers to build out infrastructures in areas that traditionally have been underserved. So there's a lot of activity with the municipalities, but it's more on this public-private partnership side. It's less of them as a customer. Yeah, as an enabler.
Maybe that's a good transition to talk a little bit about Link NYC, which is specific to NYC, to which Zenfi is involved in. Can you talk about what that is and maybe use that as an example of kind of this partnership that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a perfect example. I mean, it's one of the most innovative case studies that I certainly know about in the States. The city of New York around 2013, 2014 took a look around the city, and they had 10,000 payphones all around the city that weren't being used. Why weren't they being used? Because people had cell phones, right? So, and they were becoming a bit of an eyesore. Graffiti, trash would build up on it, and the city wanted to find a better use of those assets. And what they did was they offered a franchise, and the franchise was to replace the existing payphones with these link structures. Now, these link structures offer free public calling, free gigabit Wi-Fi, USB charging, and advertising. And the really cool thing about this project is the New York City taxpayer doesn't pay $1. In fact, they get paid for the service because a portion of the revenues from the advertising are paid to the city. The advertising is used to fulfill the build out of the underlying network, and there is a free public Wi-Fi network throughout the city to each of these sites. And the byproduct of all that is now you have areas of the city that traditionally haven't had neutral fiber infrastructure, and they haven't had an increase in data centers because they haven't been in the commercial zones, now have those. And so as that network gets built out, third parties can take advantage of it. And I think we can imagine in the future, those will be wireless siting opportunities, and that will just expand. We see this in the MTA with, Transit Wireless has a similar partnership, expanding Wi-Fi as service throughout the subways, creating this underlying architecture that eventually can be leveraged for other opportunities. And I think that the more that municipalities can get creative with the assets that they have and transforming those assets into infrastructure that can support wireless technologies today, the better for everyone, and the citizens really, really benefit from it.
Last question, because I know Alyssa is asking us to finish it up here. How much of your time then are you spending as the Chief Revenue Officer just evangelizing what's going on, just letting people know that this is an opportunity versus them already knowing, and it's just a matter of your typical blocking and tackling as a salesperson, just trying to figure out those opportunities?
I think it depends what part of the business we're talking about. You know, when it comes to that virtual infrastructure, we're just at the beginning. We're out selling it and talking up the benefits, and we're starting to hear it at other conferences, which I think that's a good stepping stone, and I think shows that we're directionally correct, at least there. When it comes to the shared assets, you know, that's everyone is on board there. That's not as big of a sell. The thing I spend the most time doing today is selling, not necessarily just to customers, but selling to communities and selling to our partners, because we can't sell a product to our customers, to AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, any of these carriers, if we can't deploy a site. And what I'm finding today is everyone out there wants 5G service. Everyone out there wants the brand new, shiny, great broadband. They don't want any jitter on their Zoom calls, but people don't realize in order to get that, there's an infrastructure build that has to happen. So we spend a lot of our time talking to communities and constituents, and as a byproduct, that, you know, helps us sell more to our customers.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Alyssa, thank you for the opportunity as well. And I think we're all set.
You guys were great. And Victoria, you know, it's always a pleasure to have you on our program. You know, I know, you know, Ray was supposed to be here, but don't tell him I told you this, but I'm so glad that you're here instead.
Happy to be a sub-in.
No, it's so interesting what you guys are doing, right? You know, you're in a niche market, the New York, New Jersey metro market, but that also gives you an opportunity to really focus on how to solve those problems in that market. It gives you that flexibility to really understand the nuances that's needed and kind of redefine how you design and deploy and then manage that infrastructure more effectively. And it becomes, you know, in many ways, a spotlight that can be replicated in other dense markets, as well as be deployed in even emerging markets and secondary markets that, you know, as you're optimizing here in the New York, New Jersey market, they can do it better out the gate in additional markets. So it's really, it's pretty cool that you guys focus it from such a different perspective, you know, kind of taking a look back, challenging yourself, challenging your team to think differently and approach things differently, not just from the same point of view all the time.
We agree. We think it's pretty cool too, Alyssa.
Yeah. And Colby, you're pretty cool too. Cohen's been, you know, such a great supporter of our events. You've been a keynote at events in past. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you guys for the conversation. We're going to wrap today with a raffle. That's what we're going to do. And here at NEDAS, one of the fun things and fun ways that we do a raffle is that we get to spin the wheel. Here we go. So, you know, we didn't have an enter the raffle, but when we took everyone's names off of our leaderboard out there, and our raffle winner for today is Ross Hammer. Congratulations. We'll be reaching out to you directly. And if you guys weren't paying attention to our raffle winner on Monday, that was Mark Marks. So I'm just writing down Ross's name next to Mark Marks, and we'll be in touch with our raffle. So listen, this is not necessarily the end of NEDAS, because we have our showcase, our virtual showcase exhibits open. So certainly hop in, click through. More chances to win a raffle. And then at 5 Eastern today, we're going to be online in our virtual chat room. It's called Spatial Chat. It's super cool, very fun, and we hope to see you there. So until 5 Eastern, talk to you soon.